Matt Davis, thank you so much for joining me. You got some stuff that you brought me, a Ted Lasso.
Yes.
Believe. And then make sure. This is your 50th coin?
Yeah, my 50th birthday coin. It says on the
What's
50.
What's Motown?
Oh, Motown is my nickname. So.
It's probably too shiny. This is super cool, man. This is huge.
Yeah.
Go big or go home.
Yeah, I have a friend that he does them. He does them, and we order them directly from the factory. So.
Oh, does he design them or like
he
create
designs them? He helped me with those. So.
Right on.
Shout out to Greg Bryant.
There you go, Greg Bryant. I will be contacting you.
Yes,
for
we'll get you your number.
Yeah, and then on to what the meat and potatoes of this podcast is.
Let's do it.
Leadership. You said start with why. Is this like a generational like hit at me because I'm a millennial and I ask why a lot?
No, it's not.
Okay,
it's not. It's just the thing of I think that if we're gonna build organizations with high trust, we need to know each other's why.
That's a good. I do think a lot of millennials ask why, and I want to get into a little bit of the changes of leadership and how a generation kind of shifted how people lead. And I do agree with you. I think if you know somebody's why, I think you can truly lead that individual into success. But I'll give you a quick background of you. 13 years law enforcement.
Yes.
Before that, a little bit of finance in the auto industry. 13 years and then progressed to the rank of lieutenant.
Yes.
Is quite incredible. Mostly from an aspect of, I feel like your command staff, right? Like
I'm one level below.
Okay.
But I have 53 people under my command right now.
Right. So it's like to do that in 13 years is pretty big.
It is pretty big.
So right on. Fist bump for you.
Thanks.
So I guess kind of walk me. I do want to start. Why did you get into law enforcement? Because it's a second career for you.
It is a second career for me.
So what happened to give you that push?
I ended up going to Citizens Police Academy.
Okay.
At a local agency here in Douglas County, and I went to the 6-week program that they had, and I went out on a ride along, and I'm like, wow, is somebody gonna pay me to get in a car and drive around and problem solve? And I thought, this is great. And I've always wanted to drive a cop car. My favorite shows growing up were all cop shows. So Chips was my favorite show of all time. Erik Estrada is on my bucket list to get a picture with. Like I want to get a picture with Erik Estrada, and then Miami Vice and those type of things. Like those were all the shows of my time. So it just felt right. It felt like it was connected with me. So I had to drop some weight at that time. I was not ready to go. I started testing. Started testing in like 2008.
And how old were you at this point?
32, 33.
Okay.
I didn't get hired until 2011 at my current location, but I went to the police academy in 2010, and I was a self-sponsored guy, so I did not have a job when I showed up over there. And I was one of the oldest. I think I was the second oldest person in my police academy class.
Right on.
At 30. So when I got hired, I was like the old guy.
Not old, just wise.
Wiser. I had a lot of life experience for sure.
Yeah, and I do feel like, especially one of the things I struggled with, so I got into law enforcement, I think, 22. So I was in the military at 19, finished up my bachelor's degree, and then I think 21 or 22. And, one of the things I struggled with is people call you and look to you to solve their problems.
Correct.
And I just remember looking at them like, I'm 20-something years old. I don't know how to parent this child.
Correct.
Like, it's made me a great parent now.
Right.
But my goodness, the amount of overwhelming push for you to perform and to have this connection, to have this life experience. It happens quick.
It does.
But like that first 6 months is terrifying because it's like, I don't know how to connect to this person that's 40 years old and they're 9 or 16-year-old child smoking weed in their house. Like,
correct.
I don't know what to do. So it was interesting.
It's a lot easier when you come in with a little life experience, and that's hard. Like the teammates that I have now that are younger in their career, I always tell them I've done all my running and gunning. I've done great things in my career. I'm here to help you get to where you want to go, and they need that life experience. And sometimes we need to let them fail so they can get some of that life experience. So that's really what I'm trying to do now as a mentor and a leader in the organization I'm in right now.
Yeah. So what actually started your desire to go from, because you did patrol for how long?
I did patrol for 18 months.
Okay.
And then I was selected to go on a undercover team, plainclothes, street crime, vice crime team.
Okay.
And then I was on that team for about 2.5 years, and then they split. And I had interviewed enough people that were coming off of drugs, so I was sort of done with the drug thing. I had worked a case with the DEA, and I knew that there was not going to be much more of a more pinnacle case for me because it was a large wire case.
Okay.
So I'm proud of my work in that one because I wrote a 77-page search warrant to end it.
Goodness gracious.
So largest search warrant ever.
Yeah.
At that point, I had the choice. I could go to our special investigations unit, and that's what I ended up doing, and did that. And then my 5 years was up total, and they were like, you can either go push a radiator, you can put in for general investigations, or you can put in for sergeant. So I'm like, I'm going to put in for sergeant, and that sort of started my leadership journey.
How'd you feel when it's quite a big step? Let's start off with this. What would you define a line level supervisor as?
Line level supervisor is someone that, well, it depends. Are we talking about line level leadership or line level supervisor? Because those are two different things for me.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's go with leadership. And who is a line level leadership?
So line level leadership can be anybody that's on a team. So if you're working line operations in a law enforcement agency, you can have many people that, we would say informal leadership. And then you've got guys with stripes, and you got guys with bars, and then you got guys with stars. Mm-hmm. Just because you've got those things does not make you a leader of that team, and does not make you a leader of people. It gives you some supervisory responsibility, and there's a lot of liability that you take on because you go from being liable for yourself and what you do to now having 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 or 8 line level people. And, it depends on their experience, what you need to do.
So it goes more so from the essence of leadership to supervision.
Yes.
And liability, mitigating liability, what used to be for the agency, but I think because of 217, more so for yourself as well as the other officers involved.
Right.
Which is something I'd like to pick your brain a little bit about. So going from, did you view yourself as a leader before putting in for sergeant, personally?
I did, because once you get on a specialized team like I was on, you're a case agent when you're in that position. So I had, I'd stood in front of a room of a lot of people that were a lot bigger rank, and this was my case, and I'm briefing it out to SWAT team, briefing it out to other people. I was also a negotiator on our negotiations team, so a lot of times I would have to brief command staff. I didn't have a problem with doing that. I like complex cases, so a lot of my cases I had to give reviews to the district attorney's office as well as the U.S. attorney's office on a couple of cases. So I felt like I knew what I was doing in my role, and I could carry a room. So the buck stops with you when you're the case agent. So I was already doing a lot of leadership from that time. And when you go from that to now just going back and just pushing a patrol car, it's sort of a
this sucks,
right? Like,
yeah.
Hey, you get really good and you get a lot of felony crimes and you do all that kind of stuff, but you're like, hey, I wish I was doing this and setting up surveillance and doing all these things that were a lot more complex.
What do you think that drive is? This is turning into a therapy session now.
Yeah, drive. So drive's going to be very, very different from everybody. I think that gets to sort of the book that I gave you about starting with why. You got to know what your why is. Yeah.
And that's kind of why that's kind of why
Yeah.
I asked that is, you know, personally, I can think back to what motivated me initially to become a sergeant in the Air Force.
Mhm.
And a lot of it was, for better or for worse, I had really bad supervisors. And I was like, if they're a supervisor, there's no way I can't get this.
Right.
Which, surprise, I got it.
Mhm.
And then, so I was more so motivated by frustration at that time.
Mhm.
And then it woefully prepared me for being a sergeant. I had no clue what I was doing. So when you go from this special assignment and you put on sergeant, do you go back to patrol? Where do you go?
Well, at our agency, you go to the jail.
Okay.
So I had not been hired. I had been hired directly to the road.
Okay.
The other thing is, in my prior career, I had been a supervisor. The last, the last title I held was director of internet lending for a company.
Mm-hmm.
So I had about 5 to 7 people that I supervised to be able to do that, and so I had already been leading people in a probably supervising. I don't know if I've truly gotten good at leading people until the last few years when I really started putting some effort into that.
Okay. So you go to detentions, and what's the day one? You get promoted. You're sworn in.
Yep.
Right.
Go over to the jail.
Do you go to work that day?
Yep. You get sworn in.
Okay.
You go over to the jail, and then it's sort of drinking from a fire hose because I never worked at the jail, so I had to do deputy training. So I worked the pod, worked booking, all that kind of stuff, and then you do that for about a month, and then you do your sergeant's training, and then you start working with your team, and you have the teams are a lot larger there, and you see each other on a daily basis.
So you got a lot of personnel
Yes.
conflict at times.
You do a lot of HR stuff. I'm very good at HR paperwork from my time being
Working
there at the
that.
jail. Uh-huh.
And so day one, what's the sensation as walking in there? Like I'm talking once you've gone through your deputy training, once you've gone through your supervisor training, and you're released to your team to be prosperous.
That's really, I'm just thinking, hey, I've got all this experience. I'm very comfortable in who I am and what I am as a cop. And I'm just going to find other people that have the same motivation as me. I just assumed, I think, and you know what happens when you assume, right?
Yeah.
We can do the diagram. I just assumed that everybody on my team would be working to get to where I was.
Right.
Or say, oh, I want to be a homicide detective, or hey, I want to be a special investigations detective. I want to be a captain. I want to be a chief. No, most of your team is just I'm here to get through the day and get my paycheck and do my job.
How'd you feel, like when you realize that? Because
it makes you wonder, like, what am I going to do to make sure that I motivate everyone to be able to get the common goal going.
Did you have a particular incident that really kind of stood out to you as that pinnacle moment, that epiphany, where you realize like not everybody? I don't want to use the word motivation, right? Because an individual that goes into work, shows up on time, like that's motivation in itself.
Correct.
And there's no hate towards individuals that just want to be that level. They want to work. I actually commend them because I wish I had that kind of acceptance of like where I'm at and focus on personal life and things like that. A lot of times they're all stars in those other areas. But what was a moment for you that you had this interaction? Was it a moment of frustration for you, whereas like this person's not doing this?
I think it was. So there's a lot of training that you get when you become a new supervisor, especially at the place. I really enjoy working where I work, and they've been really great to me. And they've provided me a lot of training and a lot of leadership training since I went to this. I went to a tactical class, which you would think, oh, what's a tactical class going to teach about leadership? But it was run by some guys that were Green Berets, Rangers, and they talked about the why. And it got brought up in class because it's like, how do you deal with these new people in special forces And he goes, well, we just added on to the briefing. We just told them the why. So we're not having that discussion when we're about to get out of a helicopter or assault a place. Like, it seems pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
He's like, we just added on to the briefing. We just told everybody why. And then it wasn't somebody stopping me while we're going to assault this area or this target. We weren't stopping. Everybody knew what their why was. And I'm like, wow. So I started looking up why. And that's when I found Simon Sinek.
So when you became a supervisor, were you as motivated? Because the stuff that you post is fantastic, and I love your book club, and I'd like to get into it a little bit later. But to constantly strive for betterment and knowledge is something that I was kind of instilled with in the military. Everyone thinks like, oh, I'm going to join the military. I won't have to go to college. I won't have to learn. That is fake news all day long. And one of the things I really appreciate is this instillment of always bettering yourself, always trying to learn. And it could be audiobooks, it could be actual books, it could be conferences you go to, classes and whatnot. When did this start for you?
I would say this started for me probably 3 years ago.
Okay.
3 or 4 years ago. And it was a culmination of things. My bucket of incidences and trauma that I had not dealt with at work filled up. It bled over into my relationships, just in general. And, with my family, my kids. And it got to the point where I needed to ask for help. And I ended up having to get professional help to work through some of those things. And it led me to make a lot of changes in my life and made me really sit down and go, what is my why? Where am I at? What do I want? What is who is authentically Matt Davis and what that looks like? And I think that's really what changed me from what you see today and what you see on my LinkedIn presence, my social media presence is much more about that guy, that authentic guy that had gotten lost for a little while because, doing this job, there's definitely a disconnect and you hear the stories all the time. I was very much different at work than I was at home.
Yep.
And that affected my home life. But really what was ended up happening is I had a long-term toxic relationship with myself. And I was not, I saw some of your episodes and you talk about how you have the inner voice. And I was my own worst enemy. Mistakes were always magnified 10, 12, 13 times. On the outside, I looked very plain. Like, Matt seems like he's okay. Inside, I was just just telling myself I wasn't worth it. I was the fault for everything that was going bad in my life, and I was very much a victim. And so I needed to take control of my life. So when my therapist gave me some homework and I went out and found a control circle, it changed my life.
What is a control circle?
So control circle is just, I've got my control circle with me, actually. I carry it with me all the time. And my teammates are already, they always,
You're okay.
oh, sorry.
No, you're okay.
It just simply tells me what's in my control and what's in my control.
For the
you
camera?
Sure can.
This is is there an app Mindful Enough?
Yeah, so you can just download that off the internet.
Let me hold this up. For those just listening in, I'm holding up a sheet of paper that says out of my control, in my control, out of my control, the actions of others, the past, the opinions of others, what happens around me, what other people think of me. That is huge. I wish that was bold. How others take care of themselves, the future, the outcome of my effort. And then there's a circle in the center of the page that says in my control, my thoughts and actions, how I speak to myself, how I spend my free time, my boundaries. I wish, again, that was in bold. How I handle challenges, the goals I set, what I give my energy to.
Yes.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm Where can you go to print this out?
You can just go to the right there, and I'm working on doing a training where I actually teach people how to do their own control circle, because I think it's that important.
That's huge.
I think it's that important.
If I could, I've been going to therapy for 2.5 years now, or 2 years, and that encompasses everything that I work through during pretty much every session.
Yeah.
And that's gold.
Yeah, that, like, I was speaking to myself like I was a total piece of shit, you know, and my boundaries. I was the guy. You need me to come over, help you with doing something in your garage, moving. I'd do it, but I wasn't the guy that was going to ask you to come over and help me. And my life was in fucking shambles. It's pardon my French, but you know, that's where I was, and my relationships were like that too. And I didn't know how to ask for help. And I had moments, like, from the outside, it seemed very good, but I had this horrible toxic relationship with myself. And that was life-changing. So much to where I went into my therapist's office and I'm like, I just want to know that I'm not crazy.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
She's like, you're not crazy.
Yeah, there's this, and for, you've listened to a few of my episodes, you know this. There's so many people walking around thinking they're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I don't know. Like, and this has to be normal. You go to therapy and you're like, yeah, this is normal. To a certain extent, we'll work through it and get your thought process back to where it needs to be. But it's normal to not be normal. It's normal not to be well, you know, and I wish more people, shout out to Rory McDade, my first FTO in law enforcement. And he looked at me, and the first day he said, well, two things. One, he's like, I don't know why you're doing this job. I wouldn't do this job if I were you. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing he says, if you're going to do this job, you need to go get help right now.
Right.
And I kick myself for my younger self, although it's out of my control. It's the past, for not heeding his words more. I was afraid. I was like, I didn't want to be perceived as weak. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to have this facade of like, oh, he's already going to therapy.
Right.
And if only I knew the amount of officers that were already going to therapy. Mm-hmm. And that's like the reason why I kind of go off on this tangent for a quick minute is I just hope that if any officer is listening anywhere, that they start therapy, even if they don't think they need it.
Right.
Just go sit down in the chair and say nothing.
If that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do.
Yes.
Like, I think wellness is very much like, for me, my toxic relationship spilled into a lot of other relationships. And I had been going to marriage therapy for years.
Before the self-therapy. And so I knew, like, I wasn't afraid to go in on the couch and know what's going on. But I look back now at the first time I went to a therapist, and a real therapist that deals with cops and firemen. You know, there's a lot of them here in the Denver area. And, you know, I went and I sat down and I think about the things I shared with the therapist that day. And I'm like, man, that person would have just looked at me and said, your bucket is still filling up, guy. Like, you're not really dealing with anything. Right.
Where the next time when I call, because I think I went 2 or 3 times before
and you're a sergeant at this point.
I'm a sergeant at this point.
Okay.
I had one of the people I supervised, they got in a shooting, and I got left there as the final supervisor on scene. And, you know, the final cleanup is you hose this whole thing down. Mm-hmm. And what really got to me is this guy's innards just getting hosed down off the parking lot. And it had been during right as the time frame is a little fuzzy there, right as COVID started. Mm-hmm. You know, it was in that COVID time frame. And, you know, that does a number on everyone.
Absolutely.
I remember my first exposure to COVID. Someone that had COVID. It was within the first couple of days, and they basically just sent me home. They like put all my uniforms. They're like, yeah, we'll just issue you new uniforms, or they just sprayed them heavily with all kinds of decon. It was like being decon from going in a meth lab.
Yeah.
And they sent me home with N95 mask and said, sleep in your guest room and call the paramedics if you can't breathe. And,
oh my God.
Yeah, not a good.
And this is before anybody knew the mortality rate
at all,
anything. It was this strange disease.
Correct.
That was spreading around the world.
Correct. That we were having to lock people down and put people under quarantine and all this kind of stuff. So it was wild. And then the bucket gets fuller when all the stuff in Minneapolis happens.
Yeah.
And the civil unrest,
Ferguson
and all that kind of stuff, like all that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So you go from, we had a couple of weeks where people thought we were great, then we were not, and then you have all the riots and everything, mm-hmm. and you're just working straight all the time, and then right after that you have 217 happens, and so.
And you still decided to stick around.
I did.
I commend a moment for all law enforcement or peace officers, as Colorado calls them, that decided after Senate Bill 217 passed that they are going to stay in the state and continue working. Mm-hmm. I think my personal beliefs, 217 brought about a lot of reform that was lacking. The things I have issue with are the duty to intervene and how loose the definition is. Mm-hmm. But so your bucket's getting more full, and more full. And then it just sort of overflows. Does it influence and you don't have to answer this, but does it influence your work persona?
I don't think it influenced my work persona. I try to be a calm guy at work.
Because at this time you haven't fully gone to therapy often.
Correct.
So you're still having my personal experience, two identities, mm-hmm. where you have what you're trying to present to your family, your friends, and then what you're trying to present to your work.
Right. If I could have worked 20 hours a day, I would have felt more comfortable working 20 hours a day than going home. So that's what happens when you don't know what you're sort of you're in a toxic relationship with yourself. And I think there are a lot more people out there, Matt, that are in a toxic relationship with themselves and they don't realize it, or they're afraid. Like all these things on the outside of the circle were controlling my life before I was able to figure this out. And I was not maintaining any boundaries. The few boundaries I maintained, they would not be boundaries that I would be maintaining now. Like I maintain boundaries a lot differently. Mm-hmm. What people think of me, I assumed a lot of things, and how people viewed me was very differently than I viewed myself. And there were some people that I didn't need to worry about that any longer. Like I just needed to go on. The future and the past I had a lot of regret from my past. And so that's one of the things, like if you see my post, I post a lot about my education. I've mm-hmm. decided to go back to school. I put a post out today because my grades just got final. I like to share my grades. And because I was a horrible
posted on that refrigerator.
Right.
Matt.
Right.
Love it.
I started my educational thing in 1993 when I was a freshman at Arizona State University. And I was there maybe a year and a half, and then they asked me to leave because my grades were so atrocious. Oh, and then community college, and then another college, and then you get married, and then you have kids, and mm-hmm. that's not important because you're working this career, and
you're raising a family.
Right. Degree is not important.
Yep.
But that inner thought was always, Matt, you're not good enough. You don't have a degree, so you can't do anything.
Do you think that quick side tangent on that? Do you think that was generational? Because you were born in
74.
So you're a Gen X.
Mm-hmm.
almost, because millennials, I think, started 84. So you're
Correct.
10 years before millennials.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like both of our generations were kind of fed this cup of like, if you don't go to college, you're a failure.
Yes.
If you don't do this, you're not going to ever make it in life, which I do think education is important. I got my bachelor's degree, and it's not a Ponzi scheme. I don't get any kickbacks for telling you to go to college. I truly think it's a learning experience. It works out the brain.
Right.
But I think generationally, I think we were fed a lot of propaganda when it comes to self-reflection and self-image in relation to higher education.
Right. I would agree with that. Like my father he was number 2 or 3 of 8 children, and he was the first of anybody in his family to graduate college. And so that was something that I think it was just sort of instilled with us. My mom was a good student. Mm-hmm. She only went to a couple of years of college. She didn't graduate, but she was a really good student. My father he ended up being just short of a vice president when he retired from the company he worked for 32 years. It was very much like suburban life. I always lived in really nice locations. We moved a ton because of promotions for my dad. So we got to move around a lot. So I was a little bit of a chameleon already, because every 18 to 24 months I'm moving to a new location. So I consider recreate who I am as a child, and then we ended up landing in Arizona, and that's where my brother and parents got off the train. They end up, they're there permanently. But, from that standpoint there's a lot going into that about how your family is and what's expected of you. My brother was a horrible student in high school. He just stayed, well, he'll listen to this podcast. He wasn't the best student. He was an amazing athlete. My impression of my brother in high school is he stayed eligible for sports.
Yeah.
But he goes to college, and he's an amazing college guy, and he's now a teacher, high school teacher, and been doing that for many, many years, and been a high school football coach for a long time. And he leads people on the daily, and he's done amazing things because he found where he fit. Like that's where he fit. Yeah, what's his why? And he has an amazing family, and he does amazing things, and he's less about the wins and losses than making good people, like giving people tools to be able to do better. And I know a lot of his athletes come back and talk to him, and they become coaches with him and things like that. So that's really, awesome. For me, once you get in that career, I just had picked up with the same career my dad had done, and just sort of stayed in that until I found law enforcement. And I'm like, I want to, you want to make a difference, or, you sit in enough of these interviews, and it's always like, and, there's a difference. Like when I got hired, it was all about catching bad guys, because I was the oldest guy. So they're interviewing, they're thinking I'm coming in, and it's 2000, it's after that 2007. There are a lot of guys my age that are unemployed. Yeah. And you look at law enforcement, and we're going to be very much underemployed compared to where we were in our careers before.
Yes.
So, because back then it was like you're getting hired at like $47,000.
Yeah.
And I'd been making double that at my other career. So they look at you and go, you're 35 years old and you're really resetting your entire career path. How long are you here for? Like, are you just here for a couple of years and then?
Yeah. Just to say you did it.
Correct.
Or,
Correct.
What's your motive?
Right. What's my motive? And so I had to get very focused in on, hey, I want to take bad guys to jail. That was my mantra.
And this was 2011, right?
2010, 2011. I probably applied with agencies. The first place I went and did a test was San Diego.
Oh, okay.
Because I have a relative that works over in San Diego.
The sheriff's department out there?
No, the police, the PD.
Okay.
And I did not know at the time that's one of the hardest tests
to get into.
Well, you line up and you got to be one of the first. I think the day that I went, they only had 500 seats, and there were over 1,000 people in line that day.
Oh my God.
At Balboa Park. So, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for that. And I got so far through the process, but I didn't get far enough through where I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
So it took me a couple more years, and I applied with a lot of different places, and I was just 1 off or 2 off. And I was on Aurora's list for a long time. I was on 2 of their lists. And then, you know, when it rains, it pours. I go to the police academy. I had 3 agencies or 4 agencies that I put in with. 2 of them said, no, thanks. And then it was up against where I'm at now and another agency, and they were both sheriff's offices. And one said, you can come here and go to the jail, and one said you can go to patrol. So I chose the one to go to patrol.
Of course.
Correct.
Yeah. Path of least resistance for your desired outcome.
Because at that time, when I looked at law enforcement, I'm like, the 2 things that really stood out for me is I might have wanted to run a K-9, and I wanted to be an SRO.
Oh, right on.
Neither of those things are in my wheelhouse now.
Right.
Would be something that I would want to do. From that
be
standpoint,
the supervisor.
I could be the supervisor. I'd love to be the supervisor of either one of those.
Right.
But yeah, so that just didn't work out in my career. And if you would have told me, hey, you're getting into this and you're going to be TDY to Safe Streets Task Force, the DEA, Secret Service, Homeland Security, I would have been like, sign me up. Like, that's the thing. When I look at my resume, I'm like, I got a pretty impressive resume for a guy that talked to himself badly and said, I never had enough arrest. Like in my mind, it was, I did not arrest bad enough people.
Yeah.
It was just all negative. Like I could have arrested Osama bin Laden, and it wasn't good enough.
Isn't that terrible though? It's like, for a while I thought it was a blessing because there's nothing anybody could say to me that I didn't already say worse to myself.
Yeah.
So it's like a preparation of belittlement.
Yeah.
Right. So I had this false fallacy in my brain that it was actually superpower. And, I find myself doing it because I think we're creatures of habit, right? You do something so long, it's so hard to get out of that thought process, but going to therapy and having these constant reminders of like, oh, this is just a negative thought. Like this is too intrusive.
Correct.
I don't need this right now. This isn't true.
This isn't true. Like that's the, and you think that you're the only person dealing with these things.
Yes. Before you talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, and that's the thing where I'm like, oh, I'm just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm just bad mouth. Like this is a Matt problem. It wasn't a Matt problem. It's a life problem. Like we're all going through life and we're all taking through struggles. And if we haven't figured out what our control circle is, life's is a hard, long road because we're letting everything else out of our control us.
Yes.
And so that gets to, further leadership training as you go on.
Yeah.
What really got me is I started going to some trainings with an organization called FBI LEDA, and they're a nationwide thing, and they have some of the most current law enforcement training that I can think of. There are other ones that are out there, but they bring in just people that are really relevant, and it's not stuff that you would have been teaching 5 years ago. It's relevant stuff to today. And I go to one of their classes, and the instructor stands up at the front, and all these instructors are people that have been command level, maybe chiefs of police. They've led these organizations, but they really have a focus on people. Like they're focused on the people. Like they're not worried about statistics. They're really worried about the person. Like that's the vibe that most of these instructors give off. And one stood up in front of the room and he goes, leaders are readers, or readers are leaders. Leaders are readers. And they just started listing off all these books you need to read, that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, I don't need to read any books. Like I've got plenty of life experience. I was a manager at these companies. I've gone to training through all these things. I don't need to do that. Well, when I start looking, I start finding in myself, when I start figuring out what's in my control and what's not in my control, what's going to give me a little bit of control is my education. and how relevant that is. So that's when I really got on the horse of saying, I need to start being a learner. Like I need to start, and you can lead all you want, but if you're not got current information and you're not currently working towards something and you're not learning every day, you're not really leading. You're not doing it. Like I can't lead people on a journey of leadership if I'm not leading myself on a journey of leadership. So that's where I really got, like, my hobby is leadership. And that's very much where I fit. And that's very much sort of where we met in on LinkedIn, where it's more of, I'm just trying to be that positive guy. For a long time, I was that nice guy that was getting run over, and I had that nice guy complex. Now I want to be that nice guy that wants to be the cheerleader for whatever you want to do. Like that was something, like when I reached out to you about what you were doing, you know, I just see someone that's very similar to me trying to live their best life and live authentically and be able to just go out there and just set the world on fire and do what they love to do. And be damned if we're not getting paid for it, right?
Yeah.
You know, we're all, you know, we all sit around in a room and say, how are we going to monetize this? Because this is great.
Yeah.
So I would go to those classes, and then I went to one of their conferences.
The LEDA conferences.
The LEDA conference.
This all started 3 years ago?
Well, I would say the first LEDA conference I went to was 2019.
Okay.
So it's sort of mixed.
It blends in with the self-help leadership, and which again I think is synonymous.
Yeah.
I think if you're in shambles, how are you gonna lead people? How are you gonna motivate people? How are you gonna lead them?
Yes.
So just to get a timeline in my brain.
Yes.
So you go to this conference.
I go to the conference. I end up meeting I love like these challenge coins I gave you. I love trading challenge coins. After I went to Police Week, and I have like you see many pictures of my challenge coins and my patches and things like that. I love collecting all of those. And I end up meeting some people on there, and one of the guys, he's putting in for a board position there. And so we just get to talking, and we're just we just click. And empathy is important, because for a long time I was the most empathetic person I knew, right? And but it was probably not real positive empathy. It was probably more uncontrolled empathy, if you can, because it can be good or bad. And but being a negotiator, I know about active listening. I understand we have 2 ears for a reason and one mouth. Like, we need to listen more. And with that, we just became friends. And he's a chief of police out in Delaware, and he's starting his own podcast here soon. So I'm excited about that. But we just started talking, and we just met a lot of other people at that conference that were just sort of along that same line. And it became a support. Like, I saw some mentoring. Like, my law enforcement world got much bigger than just Colorado.
Yes.
So I was able to make friends in all these other states, and I could reach out to them. I could talk to them, and see they're dealing with all the same stuff.
Yeah, it's not just a Colorado issue.
Correct.
This is a career-wide issue. And I don't know if you've spoken to anybody overseas yet, but it's interesting to hear its issues over there too. Oh, well,
at this conference, I ended up talking to an Australian federal police officer.
Mm-hmm.
And he had also been a negotiator. And I brought up to him, I go, so tell me about officer wellness. And he goes, well, I'll tell you, officer wellness is this. We have to put we have a crisis intervention person in our gun room, because we've had officers that check their gun out because they can't take their guns home.
Right. It's a controlled country.
They will shoot and kill themselves in the police station, or go out to their car and shoot themselves. So no, this is not and we started talking about gun violence.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, I would rather go to any GSW type of situation than go to something where someone has used a machete and hacked up people.
Yeah.
And never had a thought about that. So your world gets a lot bigger,
mm-hmm.
a lot bigger of what's going on. And you see, it's not just a Colorado problem. And this is before 217 and a lot of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But thank goodness I had these friends that I could reach out to and say, hey, this is what's going on. So I've been very consistent on being part of that organization and continue with their, I'm a proud member. They have a Trilogy Award. So when you take their 3 classes, you're able to do that. I've also gotten some DEI training through them, and it's top notch. Like I don't think there's better training that you can get. And it's really changed my perspective on leadership and seeing these other people that are really passionate about leading leaders. And that's what got me back into school. I had been going back for cybersecurity, and then I really wanted to, I want to get my degree. I want to get my master's degree. So that's when I switched to doing a DU, and they have a leadership program, and it's been amazing. And
is it specifically for like a bachelor's degree in leadership?
It is. And then you can roll right into a master's degree in leadership.
That's beautiful, because regardless of what industry you're in, leadership is so universal. I would argue that law enforcement, and this is from my time in the military, law enforcement leadership is significantly harder than military leadership. Military leadership is normally pointed to as this is the hardest, but I would argue that the military, to a certain extent, pushes you to find where people are great, because you can't get rid of them.
Right.
They're stuck in a contract. So I get that. It's difficult to deal with individuals when you can't just fire them. But from an aspect of just unknown issues that are going to come up on a daily basis, most of the military operations that I've ever been a part of were always very methodical. We knew when we were going to leave. We knew where we were going to go. We knew what we were going to do. We knew when we were going to come back.
Yes.
And then we had contingency plans for each step. I don't think there's been a single day that I've gone to work that I knew exactly when I was going to leave, exactly who I was going to contact, exactly what they were going to do, and when I was going to be back.
Correct.
Not a single day.
Not a single day in my law enforcement career has that ever happened.
Right.
Unless I'm going to court.
And
Unless
the court's going to be all day.
Right.
Right.
But
even then, you don't know when you're going to leave.
Correct. You don't.
So what I'm saying is it's difficult from a operation standpoint, which inevitably bleeds over into leadership.
Yes.
Because you're dealing with the stress of that, the stress that you're feeling as an individual, because that doesn't go away when you become a leader. You're in the situation as well. But then you have the stress of this individual. You have their decisions that, some people make great decisions and you don't ever have to worry about them. Then you have others that you need to build and lead. And that's truly when you show yourself as a leader, is when you take those, like if you have the A team and you're the supervisor or you're the leader, we'll go with supervisor at this point because sergeant, you're not really challenging yourself.
Right.
Because they're the A team. You don't have to really do anything. You don't have to motivate them. You show up, you're like, hey guys, let's go hit it. They're like, well, let's do it.
We're already, you've kept me here 5 minutes too late.
Yeah.
Is what they're saying.
Like
why did you call me in a briefing?
Why are we doing briefing? We could have done this over the phone.
Correct.
Like, let's go.
Correct.
It's when you have those individuals that, for whatever reasons, things going on in their life, financial issues, just burnt out because they're working overtime shifts, whatever it might be, you find those individuals and now you have to motivate them. Now you have to figure out what's going on.
I think the key is, where are they leading themselves? For me, the question I ask, and this sort of gets into some others, like the Believe Challenge coin that I gave you. That's our team coin for this year. Yeah. So, we have a whole thing about Believe for our team, but it's about what they can expect the leaders on the team to lead them using Believe. So in follow-up to that, I met with everybody on my team. So I had a one-on-one with everybody on my team, and I asked them 4 questions because I feel that it's important, because just because I'm seeing them I only see them for part of the day, part of their life. I only see a little bit of the 10 hours they come and work. And then as a lieutenant, I don't see them very much at all. I just hear about them. So I feel like most people, if you're paying your bills, doing things, you're leading yourself in some way, shape, or form. You might never lead anyone else in your life, or you might just, hey, I lead my kids. I lead I have people that work for me that are very active in their churches, active in other things. Like you're active in martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
People have passions. Like no one doesn't have a passion. And where my passion is about leadership and about being authentic, I needed to find, I really felt like this is my time. I'm a lieutenant. I can ask the questions. So I asked 4 questions, and I sat down and I asked the same 4 questions. I told the exact same thing to every employee about my story and about me being a transformational leader that wants to build high trust environment, because I feel like trust is something that if we can all trust one another, it makes our job exponentially less stressful.
Yes, I would concur with that.
Right. And I think that's the number one reason that people are leaving just jobs in general. Like that's what the data would tell you, right? So I asked the 4 questions. I asked 1, what's your why? And you get a myriad of answers. You know, my kids, I'm really active in this. I'm a mountain person. I love to go hiking. I travel, all these things. You get all these different things. And then you get people that are like, they don't want to share about what's going on outside of work. So my why is I want to be a homicide detective. I want to be a chief of police. I want to be this. I want to be that. Great. I want to be a K-9 officer. I want to be a SRO. Great. Awesome. Second question I ask them is, how do you define trust? So never got the same answer.
I wouldn't expect the same answer.
Didn't get the same answer of the 50 some odd people that I asked. Got a different answer from everything.
Was there an underlining thread in all the different answers?
I think the underlying, yes, it was basically, and it's hard to quantify what that underlying thing was, but it was basically you were able to know that this person had your back and that they were willing to, it comes down to, they wanted to see authenticity so they could reflect authenticity back.
Right.
And you
that
know,
mirroring
correct.
Of interaction. Yeah.
Just like our state statute of harassment, horrible,
Yes.
like if you arrest somebody for harassment, like if I reach over and touch you and you didn't want me to do that, that's harassment, right? Unwanted touching. So it very generic. That's what trust is. Like we don't specifically ask as leaders, what does my team understand what trust is? They don't. Like they all have different definitions.
Do you think that's a flaw that a lot of leaders find themselves in, is they don't ask that question? To get like what I'm getting at is what it sounds like is in asking that question, you establish a baseline.
Yes.
You establish like, okay, this is where we're all starting.
Correct.
And this is what we can build on.
Right. Well, for them to just say it out loud, just like you know from therapy, we say a lot of things in our head. And then when it comes out to our therapist, we're like, whoa, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
You know what I hate? When my therapist, Tyson, stops and says, can you say that again?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, did I just say something wrong?
No.
I don't know. And I'm like, what did I just say? Because sometimes it's just word vomit.
Right.
So,
but they want to bring you back to be able to actually,
yeah,
actually take that in.
Yeah.
The third thing is goals. Do you have some goals set for you? And long-term, short-term, whatever. And I've had people tell me, my goal is I want to be out of law enforcement in 2 or 3 years. I want to go to this state or that state. That's fine. Like, how relieving is that? Like, they come to work every day with a secret. And that secret is they really want, their long plan is to be closer to family because they're having kids, or they feel like they want to go to this place to get their master's degree and they can be on the police. They can put in for a job there and get a job on the police force there. You're saying coming in with a secret as in like they didn't want anybody to know because they don't want to be viewed as a lesser employee. Correct. Yeah. And again, trust, authenticity, all these things where we go to a job where we know if we're partners, we might have to lay it on the line for one another.
Yeah.
But we still are holding secrets, right? And what for me in my journey, it's been very much freeing where I'm just living authentically.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no, once I'm in that control circle, there's really no secrets.
Yeah.
All my dirty laundry is out there, and I'm glad to talk to anybody about my dirty laundry. But that doesn't change who I am today. And I'm not going to worry about the past.
Yeah.
I'm not going to worry about the future. I'm just going to continue on in this day and be the best person I can be today. So that's the third question I ask them. And then the fourth question is, what do you need from me? And I get a lot of blank stares. Because, they're like, I've never worked for you. I don't know anything about you. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what you can bring to the table.
Correct.
For what I'm looking for.
Correct. So that's my time as a leader to be able to, because I get being an investigator, doing some extra training on setting up a room that's efficient for what the message you're trying to bring is very important. Like I specifically set people in my office a certain way, so they're seeing certain things. So I can point out, hey, I've done, like where I sit, I have all these pictures of great things. I'm not a narcissist, but I have these pictures of all the things I've done in my career.
Right.
And I'm like, hey, I want you to see, I want to help you get this
What's
same
behind
wall.
you.
Yeah. I want you to be able to do that. So, and I have some awards and some trainings and stuff up there. And I go, I want this for you. So tell me what I can do for you.
Yeah.
Like I can't make you better. Like I can't do interviews for you. I can't speed along. I think everybody wants to do everything. Like your career is not a microwave meal. Like you just don't put it in, cook it for 5 minutes and you're there. Because leadership is a journey, right? And so I just want them to know I'm here on the journey with you and I'm a resource for you. So let me know. And like right now we've got I think I've got 8 or 9 people on the 3 teams that I lead. They're putting in for other positions within the department where they'll move out of detentions and move on to another area. And I've got another supervisor that's very passionate about getting people prepared and mentoring, and we're bringing people in for them to talk to. So it's not, we're doing mock scenarios with them. We're talking about having a strong oral resume, all these things that hopefully they can use for their career going forward. Because hopefully I just want, like if everybody on my team said, hey, I want to be a chief of police, there are plenty of agencies for them to go and be chiefs of police at. Yes. And I would love that.
Yeah. And so one of my questions is, I'm sure you have overlap days, right, for your different teams. Do you focus on, how do you determine who goes to training and when? Because that's a difficult one that I found myself in as a sergeant when I was in the Air Force is, do I send this person because it'll motivate them, or do I send this person because they're really asking to go? Right. So those are the hard, in my opinion, the real hard meat and potatoes of leadership. And, I think a lot of it goes down to the sergeant level, but sergeants are influenced by who?
Their lieutenant.
By their lieutenant.
Right. And
I know it's a case-by-case situation.
It is a case-by-case situation. So we don't have very many overlaps. I think we might have 3 or 4 overlaps total, how we do our training at the agency I'm at. And, with budgetary issues at our place, it's very much hard to get people to go to different trainings. And with the amount of people that we're trying to get through a DTO program and things like that, and the amount of overtime that's available, there's not a lot. But I will tell you, the request for training for newer deputies is less than I would expect. Right. And that's more of a reflection on me as a leader. I want to increase their view, right? Right. And make them feel like, hey, you can do more if you want to.
Like at least send in the request, even if I can't get you to it, send it in.
Well, and then there's the ones that every time there's a training,
they send it in.
And then So that's the way, and that happens at supervisory level too, right?
Yes.
So sometimes you have to have that hard conversation. Like with a supervisor, you need to have the hard conversation of saying, hey, the department has sent you to 7 leadership trainings. I've yet to see you actually using, and I've gone to all 7 of the same ones. I don't see you using any of the tools that you like.
We went to the same course. I know what the course material is. I know what the methodology is.
Right.
Where are you implementing?
Correct.
Implementing it.
Right. And then you would have another supervisor. They come back and then you're like, that's a great idea. Like, let's just run with it.
Right.
So that gets to the other point of in law enforcement, I don't think we're quick to embrace this leadership principle of letting people fail. Like not to the, like failure in our job could mean that you and I don't go home.
Right.
So there is that. But there are other things, you know, policy is just a guideline. If you think about it, if you're working within the mission statement of your department,
yeah,
you're probably going to be good with your policy. Like if you can articulate, I did this because of this, someone on command staff is going to go, well, you know what? Matt was thinking there, was it? You know, we might have to make a tweak to policy to make sure that we clear that up for them. But you're doing something like we can let them fail. Like let them fail on an investigation and then let's not have it be the end of the world.
Yeah. And this is something I wanted to ask you about because it's something I've experienced in law enforcement. And I think it bleeds. If you listen to my other podcast, you already know what's coming.
No, go ahead.
But we, as line level officers, right, we have to make very split-second decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Very in a lot of there are very few times where you can sit back and say, "Let me think about this real quick." I have seen and experienced this ideology continue into leadership style, where if there's a policy violation, if there's an issue with an individual, there's a very split-second decision that needs to be made right now.
Mm-hmm.
In the reality of the situation, no one's going to die immediately if we don't make a decision.
Correct.
Nothing bad's going to happen if we just say, let us breathe for a day. We'll reconvene when we have more information.
Mm-hmm.
We'll chat about it tomorrow.
Yes.
So what's been your experience with, have you observed that? How do you mitigate that in leadership? And how this is big problem. How do we change that in the industry? How do we change this ideology and this like conditioned response to make split-second decisions?
Well, I'll give you an example of this happening to me in my career and me being the one making the split-second decision. So one of my duties as a sergeant was that I was on a team that did investigations of officer-involved shootings. We got to this officer-involved shooting. First one I'd gone out on. I'm looking at the stuff. I'm sort of handling, I'm handling it like any other shooting scene I'd ever handled before. And this is before I had gotten a lot of training in use of force and the mitigating circumstances and things like that. Because you go to we hear in training all the time, we go to our lowest level of competency in the skill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't get to, when we look for a crime to be committed or a mistake to be made, there has to be intent in that, right? So this situation, not to get into any of the details of the situation, was someone was mistakenly shot. And this is after 217. I'm thinking, we're arresting this person. This person's going to jail. And then I had a more senior person come up to me and goes, no, we got to take this, this, and this into consideration. And I'm like, oh, yeah, light bulb. If no one's constitutional rights are not done, people can make mistakes. But if I'm doing an investigation, there has to be intent there for there to be a crime. Like we can be negligent, and we all have insurance for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been guilty of doing this and getting getting more educated on that. And like body worn cameras, this is a prime thing. We all wear body worn cameras, but the point of view is not the same. If I'm dealing with stress, and there's a gun 25 feet from you, and I'm laser focused on you because you're doing something that's got me honed in on you, people look at it and go, the money wearing quarterback, and say, I can't believe they didn't address this or that. Like, their officer safety is horrible. We need to get them in additional training. We need to do this, this, and this, and this. Well, no, we haven't asked them. We should come up and say, Matt, what's going on right now? Like, what's happening at this time? We're too close. We're too quick to rush to judgment. And that's why your point of taking our time, thinking about it, that's why I find it important as a leader to know the why, the people's why. I don't think anybody shows up to work to kill someone or to hurt someone. I really don't. I don't think, I can't think of a police officer in my career that I've run up against that it's like, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
I haven't met one yet.
Okay.
Contrary to what some individuals believe, in my 9 years of working this profession so far, I haven't met a single one.
Right. If I could keep my gun in my holster for my entire career, that would be amazing and would be great, because my biggest weapon is between my ears, and that's my brain. And that's the other thing is, if we're not leading ourselves effectively up there, how can we be leading others?
Yeah.
And so that's our biggest weapon. And we want to get into a bunch of other stuff. We want to be a victim when it's, because the agency, we're not going to, you're not going to legislate out someone getting killed on a traffic stop. There's not going to be a law that's passed because, okay, you say we can't do traffic stops any longer. Well, what are you going to say to that child's parent that gets run over by somebody that was clearly speeding in the neighborhood, and they look at you and go, why aren't you out here doing speed enforcement? Well, because the state doesn't allow me to pull people over.
Are they trying to pass that?
That's happened in a couple other states, but I don't know about here in Colorado. But, that is a progressive thought.
Just don't do
in justice reform, we're going to take that out.
Yeah.
So
I think there's a lot of well-intended feelings that come from those type of legislation.
Mm-hmm.
My experience is that they're just not well-informed. So well-meaning, not well-informed.
Right.
And then, unfortunately, it leads to the negative repercussions of it being enacted until somebody repeals it.
Right.
So,
or changes it a little bit, gets that other changes. That's the thing about law enforcement is we don't have a lot of positive press going on. And, that's another step that I've taken with my team this year is I'm not the greatest writer, but they needed something to be written for our newsletter that goes out to the community. Mm-hmm. So I spotlight somebody that works in our detention section every month and talk about them a little bit, 3 to 4 paragraphs, nothing big. But it's amazing when the last one I did that's going to be printed in the next couple of days, I read it out loud to the deputies in the room, and they were everybody clapped for this deputy. It's not about me. It's about that deputy that's being highlighted. And people were like, I didn't know you went to college there. I didn't know you were getting your degree in this. And, that builds trust too, because at least at my agency, there's not a culture of us hanging out.
Right.
Like old days. I'm sure you heard all these stories about the old days where,
let's go bowling. Let's have a few beers.
Yeah. A lot of people are not like that any longer.
Right.
So that's not the culture that it's like at where I work, but we need to get to know one another. We need to know, because as a supervisor now that I might have to drive to your house, I don't want to be the first time that I meet your wife and kids is the time when I'm coming over to tell them that you've been hurt at work. Like, I want to know something. And then, I last year I had a newer officer, and their parents wanted to come and see where they worked. And he's like, do you mind that they come in? And I'm like, great, let's do it. They filled out all the forms.
Yeah.
I walked them around and took them
We are not responsible for any injuries
Correct. Correct.
that you get. Right.
I walked them around, but the best time we just sat in a conference room and I'm like, what questions do you have of me? And they had really great questions about what are things we need to look for to help our son be well-rounded in this career.
Is this a younger officer that
Younger guy,
Yeah.
not still living at home. He has a young family, all that kind of stuff, but his parents are super engaged. I'm like,
That's awesome.
man, I'd love that if my parents would have done that.
Yeah.
We'd engage more people at that way, in that level where a lot of times we don't see family members until something has really happened. Someone has a heart attack at work, stuff like that. That's not a good situation to be in.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. The agency that I work at currently does not allow family members to ride with you.
Mm-hmm.
I get the idea there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't want your attention to be split.
Correct.
And I get that. But at the same time, it'd be really cool to be like, hey, Mom, this is what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Well, your mom could come and ride along with another deputy. Yeah.
I would have to trust that deputy, though.
Correct. Correct.
I am the one that's going to choose.
Right. Correct.
So, it'd be... I do see that as super community policing and kind of like we said before, full circle,
Mm-hmm.
Not to say leaders and supervisors are the parents of the people that work there, but there is, if you're a true empathetic leader, you do view those individuals as like, this is my responsibility. This is my work family.
Right.
And I know that's like a toxic meme recently is like, if they call the workplace a family, then it's toxic.
Correct.
And some of that I think goes to the personal boundaries
Mm-hmm.
of like putting up those boundaries and being comfortable with them.
Correct.
But it's really beautiful when you have a supervisor that cares for you so much. And it just makes my personal experiences, it just makes me want to produce. It makes me want to excel in everything that I do. Not because it's like I'm seeking the attention, but just because it's that enjoyable of an environment.
Well, that comes down to personal affirmation, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times in my early career, I wanted affirmation of my teammates. I wanted affirmation of my supervisors. I wanted affirmation everywhere. Affirmation. How many more bad guys can I take to jail?
Did you ever get any acknowledgement? Like any awards or anything?
I've gotten
like that?
one. I've gotten 2 awards in my career. And, if you would ask me that question 3 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, I've been under, I'd be like, oh, yeah, I've done hundreds of things and I should have been acknowledged. But I'm very proud of my 2.
Yeah.
I got an award from actually one of the agencies that used to work for. I was part of a Metro-wide task force.
Okay.
And I got a meritorious service award from that agency for my work on that investigation. Very proud of my work on there. Like that was good stuff. And then I've got a letter of commendation for my current place. And it's that I'm very proud of. I'd gone on a call for service of I love old Navy stuff because my grandfather was in the Navy during World War II. And we went to a Navy veteran's house, and he had I forget which Iowa-class battleship it was. I think might have been New Jersey or Wisconsin. He had a model up of that, and I started talking to him. Older guy, his furnace had gone out, and he had called us for like noises or something, but he was just an older guy living there. And it was right around Thanksgiving. I remembered his address. When I went back with my kids, and we brought him some food on Thanksgiving because I had purposely asked him, hey,
what are your plans?
What are your plans for Thanksgiving? One of his daughters or one of their family members called in the sheriff's office and said, because that was not something I was going to advertise. That's not my advertisement. Like I don't advertise that. I'm just going to be a genuine individual.
Good person. Yeah.
Right. So those are my things. And, but I think a lot of my work has led to a lot of victims getting justice and feeling like they were heard. And that's okay.
Well, so the only reason why I ask is because in law enforcement, we're very heavy on documenting failures and issues, and very hesitant to write positive things.
Right.
like we utilize a system called Guardian Tracker, and thankfully deputies can put in referrals for other deputies. And so anytime that I interact with another deputy and they do something great, I know from my personal experience that the supervisor's most of the time not going to document it, unfortunately.
Right.
So I take the time to sit there and write like a little letter of accommodation. My time in the military, they kind of over award people, in my opinion.
Right.
But looking back on it, you know, getting those awards and like, hey, you completed this course, and you know the commander's going to shake your hand and, you know, present you with the award.
Correct.
Like, holy shit, I missed that so much at the time. I'm like, I got to get my class, like my blues all ready, and like this sucks. But looking back on it, I'm like, that felt really affirming.
Yes, it should. It should feel really affirming.
Yeah.
And we all, as leaders, we all need to get better at that, of being able to do that, because it's just another piece of paperwork. We use blue teams at my agency, and deputies are able to do that now, where they can put in people for employee of the month, things like that. You know, that there are people seeing good things. But what it comes down to for me, Matt, is I want to get people to understand their why, be able to figure out their control circle, and then figure out what they can believe in. If I can get them to do those three things and just start working on that road, I think self-affirmation comes from that. Personal growth comes from that. Being a good teammate, being a good spouse, being whatever, like fill in this, they're a more complete person. And it takes a lot of stress off of them where they're living life authentically. There's no skeletons in the closet. There's no this, there's no that. But it really comes down to, are they willing to put the work in? Like, I don't want, like, my thing is I really, over the last year, probably branching out on my own and doing something differently has probably been on my radar for like 4 years of making my voice heard in the law enforcement community and the leadership community. And through that, there's been different iterations. And now I've just sort of settled in. This feels real good place to be, and where I'm really authentic. I'm really passionate about why. I'm really passionate about control circles. I'm really passionate about finding what people believe in. And from that standpoint, there are a lot of leaders that just don't take that point. Like, I don't want people to get to the point. I had to get to the end of myself. Like, I was not suicidal, but I had to call a friend and say, my life is out of control. Like, I want people to not get to that point, right? And not sit there and have to go through a divorce, and not have to go through things where your child doesn't speak to you, and all these things because of poor decisions that you made, because you have a toxic relationship with yourself. Like, I just want to encourage people. You can just turn it away. Like, your one question that you sent me about, how do you redeem yourself as a leader?
Yeah, that's a big one.
How do you I think it's as simple as, how do you redeem yourself as a human being? How do you change yourself as this person? How do you want to authentically live? And for me, it's a lot of validation for me when I see, like, my brother, when I went and visited him, he goes, I've never seen you this happy before. You're back to who you were, that I recognize who you were. I have other friends that have known me for a long time. You're back to your old self. Mm-hmm. You just are, there's something different about you. I've just taken all that weight off. I've just decided I'm not going to carry it around any longer. And from starting my leadership journey, where I'm out talking about it, it really has become my passion. And I understand I'm a very unique person, because in my career, you look at those awards, we could bring multiple guys in here that have been in XY shooting, the XYZ, had a critical incident. I've been super lucky. I've not had to do any of those things. I've been the
response team.
I've been in a response team to a lot of those things. I've seen a lot of stuff that no human being should see. but I haven't been right there in the action. But in law enforcement, there's a definite difference from, I learned that when I was on the SWAT team, when I'm a negotiator versus the operators. There's a clear delineation. And for a long time, us guys that were empathetic, we're the weak guys. We're the ones that screw it all up for, you talk them out. You've screwed it up. You screwed us up from getting to do an entry.
What am I doing with this flashbang now?
Correct.
Yeah.
Put the pen back in it and put it back in.
Please don't do that.
Right.
Just throw it away somewhere safe.
Right. Just do something like, I'm sorry that I've ruined this.
Yeah.
But I see the change in law enforcement. And when I was talking about I've got a lot of newer people on my team that have come to law enforcement in the last 2 years. And for the ones that say their why is, I became a police officer because I saw what happened to George Floyd, and I want to make sure that they're good people being police officers. That's something that is like, I don't remember in my career have anybody saying, hey, I saw what happened to Rodney King and I decided to be a police officer, or I saw what happened in Missouri and wanted to be a police officer.
Right.
So, and they're coming from different backgrounds. Like I probably have some of the most diverse people. I'm super lucky to work with a bunch of diverse people that weren't born in the United States, have naturalized or become citizens here in the United States, or have not chosen to do that yet. We wouldn't have been able to hire them before. And they have all this other cultural experience, and they look at us and go, what are you guys doing? And so from that standpoint, law enforcement is changing. And I almost feel like I'm on the cusp of being too old to be, because I had this discussion a few weeks ago. I was sharing some of my thoughts about leadership with someone that's retired that I really respect. And he retired. And I was asking him, hey, are you getting back in the game? Because this is a guy, if I became chief of police, I would, like, if I needed a number 2 guy, I'm doing what I can to bring this guy in.
This guy in. Yeah.
Because he's a good quality person, and he was a good leader. Like, he's one of the people I'm like, he knows how to lead a team. And he goes, no, I wouldn't, because he goes, they're just, I can't align.
Leadership style.
I can't align with what's going to be asked of me to do in leadership style, like DEI and all these other things that are coming along. It's weird. So, we talked a little about a book club, and we were talking about Starts With Why, but there's Leaders Eat Last has been the last book club that I did. And in the back of that, they have Simon Sinek shares some things to do with millennials and Gen Zs to help them with the stuff. And I did not know this, but one of my employees had seen that I'd been sort of talking about it at work. Well, they had gotten the book too and started reading it. So I had seen that they were reading at work. So I sort of engaged in this conversation. There are a bunch of other deputies around. And the deputy they're like, hey, in the back of the book, LT, where they talk about this, I felt like he was speaking to me when it was talking about low self-esteem and some other things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? I'm like, tell me more. And there are a lot of other people standing around in the area, and people just pipe up and go, oh, I feel the same way, and feel the same way. They feel the same way. I feel like a lot of times leaders, we learned what to do. We know how to supervise cops, right? So we're just going to continue on with that. Well, there's a lot more than just why.
Yeah.
To these individuals, and to understand how brain chemistry works, and how, we're going to have people working for us that have never working with us. Also, I try not to say working for us, because no one works for me.
Right.
But they've never not had a cell phone that wasn't a smartphone.
Yeah, that's pretty wild to think about.
And like,
to have that much information at their fingertips, it had to have changed the way they problem solve, the way they think about complex issues.
Yes.
And, to go even further, I think with this artificial intelligence stuff, that's going to be the next step. Like, my kids growing up, my oldest being 5, he's going to grow up with artificial intelligence. He already asked Google almost anything.
Right.
Hey, Google, what's 2 + 2? I'm like, buddy, stop asking him that. You already know the answer.
Right.
I just want to hear the Google say it. And it's that's going to change how they perceive things and how they work through issues and everything else.
Yeah. The big thing is I think it's the dopamine release of having that instant stuff and being able to be on, like, if you look at Gen Zs and millennials, they're great at branding themselves because they've been doing it since the moment that they have gotten on social media. So some of these people are on social media since they're 6 years old. Mm-hmm. They're just as good as many marketing people about getting their personal brand, about what they want to put out there, all these things. And that's a dopamine hit. Simon Sinek talks about it in Leaders Eat Last, that that's the same type of dopamine you get from people that are gambling, people that have other types of are prone to addiction. It's still got the same type of thing. They're people. You've probably gone to calls for service where a kid, the parents are decided to take their cell phone away and they break holes in the walls or break out windows or, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
That I know I get anxiety when my phone's not working. And I grew up in the time where it was like, get out on your bike and be home before the streetlights.
Yeah.
Come on.
And don't make me come look for you.
Right. If you heard that car running or you heard your parents' voice, you're in deep, deep trouble. Like, you better start pedaling.
Yeah.
You better get home.
Yep.
And how we forget about that. Because we were getting some independence and we don't understand how that changes how people's problem solving is going to be. So we might have to work through these things. But there are some people that are afraid to lead. And they might be supervisors.
Yeah, which kind of leads me into, when did you put on lieutenant?
Just over a year ago.
Okay. So my viewpoint, and I think this is kind of industry-wide. I know some agencies operate differently, but my viewpoint, when one becomes a lieutenant, they kind of move away from that line level stuff. It's great you're doing it. Mm-hmm. It's because you lead by example, in my personal opinion. And to break down these boundaries of, brass on the collar and stuff, mm-hmm. I think it needs to be done because I think this is side tangent. I think for too long, law enforcement agencies operated way too military, paramilitary, where, we have an open door policy, but don't come talk to me.
Correct.
That type of.
Correct.
Or if you go talk to me and the sergeant finds out that you went to go talk to him,
you skip the chain of command.
Yep, it's going to be an issue. Yeah, they have an open door policy, but you'll respect chain of command. And then you're sitting there, you're like, I don't think these two things exist at the same time. But going into a lieutenant role, you're really developing sergeants mm-hmm. and teaching them mm-hmm. what you embody as line level supervision.
Correct.
How does that process work? I'm sure you sit on sergeant boards. Mm-hmm. I don't know if do you do it for other agencies?
I've done it for some other agencies for like corporal and things like that. Since I got promoted to lieutenant, I haven't been on a sergeant's board, but I was on some other boards for corporal and things like that.
So I guess what I'm curious about is what do you look for in an individual that's going to take that first? They might already be a leader, but they're taking that step into supervision. And they're going from being, because I do agree with you. I think there's a lot of leaders that don't carry any mm-hmm. rank whatsoever, not even FTO.
Right.
And they take that step and they say, you know what, I want to move into supervision. I want to challenge myself and move to the next level. What do you look for in somebody doing that? And what do you look for in developing that person once they're in that role?
The selection starts with just you raising your hand. Like just saying, hey, I want to take on this other responsibility. Because like you just said, I've had the great pleasure of supervising people that have been 20 plus years on the job, have done a lot more things in the job. And I asked them, why are you not putting in for sergeant?
The why?
The why? The why? They're very, they're like, I love what I do. So that's great. Love it. But then there's the other person that you look at their resume and they've just gone as fast as they could, and it's more about them reaching. Because when I take, and I can't speak for my agency because we have a pretty extensive promotion process. But if I'm sitting down here and you're chief of police and you want my view on what you should be looking for, I think it comes down to the why, and the things that you should look for are, can they establish their why? Are they leading themselves already? Do they want to be, are they just there to supervise, or are they there to lead? And what leading looks like. For me, I'm not going to, you're not going to see me doing line level work, but you're going to see me interacting with people and being the calm force that needs to come into the situation, because I don't want to disrespect my sergeants, because that's where I learned how to be a leader, as being a sergeant. So
and
they need
having somebody step on your toes.
Correct.
When you're like almost at what we said earlier, that failure.
Right. I'm here to, I show up and say, what do you need? If there's a critical incident, I'm glad to take instant command, and let's look bigger. But I'm very much at a 30,000 foot level, where the sergeant should be right down there. Like if I had a deputy go home, maybe the sergeant goes and fills in. I'll fill in. Like we had a few weeks ago, a month or so ago, we had a situation where one of our group therapy people came in, and I didn't have a deputy to sit with them. Well, I'm glad to sit in group therapy and sit there and be able to. That was good for the people that are in our custody to see that the watch commander is sitting in with this person to provide them. I'm just there as a security person, but there are different things that you can do. But I need to be freed up to be able to respond to whatever I need to respond to, and who knows what that's going to be.
Right.
But most of my job is 75% admin, right?
Yeah, staffing, budget,
all that good stuff, and so I want to really empower my sergeants to be able to be who they want to be and who they are authentically going to be. But they need to understand that what I think makes a great leader is someone that understands they're part of something bigger than themselves. Like that's it. If they can articulate that, because you can be a great test taker and be a horrible leader.
Yes.
You can pass every critical incident scenario with a checklist and do it great. And then, the people that you're attempting to lead aren't led. They, I want to see everybody that I lead get to whatever heights they can be to. And I want that, and that's as a human being. So if they want to get a master's degree, if they want to do this, right. I want to see them as a complete person. I just don't want to see them as an employee or just as a law enforcement person.
Yeah. A number on a roster.
Correct.
A body to, do X.
Correct. So I think that it's very much changing. And I think when you got the new generations and how they've been taught how to problem solve, like that example with your son, there are many ways to get to 4. And as supervisors, I think for a long time we learned 2 + 2 is 4. Well, 5 - 1 is 4. Right.
But that's not the way we do it. That's not the way we've ever done it.
Right.
This is how we always do it.
Correct. So I need to be okay, because this goes into brain chemistry too.
Right.
For people that get old, like I'm interested in this.
You keep saying you're old. You're not old.
Yeah. Well,
you got a lot of life in front of you.
I sure
sir.
hope so. But I look and go, brain. The more I've said no in my life, the more I've made my brain not have to deal with that.
Right.
So, like on vacation, I think about every day on vacation, I use chopsticks to eat different meals. And that was because we were mostly eating Chinese or Japanese food. Great. If you know me for any long period of time, like my brother will watch this podcast and he'll be like, I can't believe Matt was eating that kind of food. I've just stopped saying no because I said no for so long in my life, Matt, that was part of the toxic relationship that I had with myself. I wasn't willing to let myself experience things. I'm still afraid of heights. I'm working on that, but I'm not going to go bungee jumping or do anything crazy.
Right.
But that's the other thing we need to, and that's where agencies get, right? We've been having this policy. We want to do this. We want to continue to do this. And that's where we've gotten ourselves into with limited technology. Like I'm super excited. When I see this Taser 10, I'm super excited about what Axon is doing there with that whole thing. And I think they're geniuses with the way that they're marketing that, where they're like, hey, you want to reduce officer involved shootings by 50% by this product?
How are you going to say no to that?
How are you going to say no to that?
As admin,
right?
People are going to ask the question, why did you not go with this?
Right. And you're going to say, well, you don't pay enough taxes for me to spend the $4,000 it's going to be.
Right.
But you look at companies like that and you know, I don't know if your agency's Axon. We're not.
Body worn cameras?
Yeah, with their total solution, Axon Total Solution.
We are almost fully. They've got a monopoly, in my opinion.
They do,
but they're great.
They're going all the way to like Real Time Crime Center. They just bought Fusus.
Yep.
I mean,
they bought that drone program.
Yes, so real time drones. I mean, if you're going to do anything like that, like you might as well just sign up with Axon.
Yeah,
and I don't know Rick Smith, and I'm not getting paid for any of this information.
We are not sponsored nor endorsed by Axon.
But Rick, if you want me to come down to Scottsdale and come see you, I'll be glad to come and see you and have lunch with you. But you know, they clearly state their why.
Yes,
they want to reduce the amount of lethal force encounters. And I saw a video recently on one of their. I'm friends with people that work at Axon on my LinkedIn, and they showed this thing of a classic, always happens at a gas station in Florida, like a man at a gas station in Florida, right? He's got a gun in his head. They're 30 or so feet away, and he's got a gun in his head. And you know what it's going to come down to is at some point he's going to rock far enough ahead where we got to make it a lethal force situation because he can't. He's not going to make the decision. We're going to have to make, you know, he's going to do suicide by cop and put us in a bad situation. And they had a Taser 10 there. And I don't know how many probes hit this guy. I think 7. They're all independent probes that get shot out. Right. So it's no more.
Every trigger pull you make sends a probe.
Guy went down in a heap. Gun didn't go off, didn't do anything. And he was very upset that, you know, he's like, I thought you were going to shoot me, I think is what it says in the thing. But that's life altering for those deputies. Yeah. Some, like I think it was Pinellas County or somewhere like that. Like they didn't have to pull the trigger.
Again, I have yet to meet somebody in my career that goes into work with the desire to hurt or kill anybody.
Correct.
And I have had friends that were involved in those types of shootings, and the amount of what ifs that they do. Mm-hmm. You know, thankfully they listen to me when I say I think you should go to therapy.
Yes.
And they listen. They're like, yeah, I think I will.
Well, to get back to the therapy thing, if there's anybody that's watching this or listening to this and they live in the metro area and they live in this, you can hit me up. I will come and drive you to your therapist. Yes. If you are not wanting to, we could just tag team it. Like we can just come and
hit me up. I'm more than happy to get you to, I'm more than happy to sponsor, like shout out to them. We use Code 4.
And that's where I go as well. I love it there.
Absolutely fantastic. Mm-hmm. So if anybody's in the Denver metro area and they need somebody,
right,
you know,
right, yeah, that I completely agree with you. There are a bunch of others too.
Yeah,
bunch of others that, but yeah,
but they focus so well on law enforcement and the amount of outreach that they do, follow-ups with agencies. It's phenomenal.
Right, so much different than when I started. It was like, hey, if you got sent to Nicoletti or wherever, it was like, oh my gosh. I
might as well turn in my gun and badge now.
Correct. Yeah. And we've come a long way in Colorado with mental health and wellness, and especially with the agencies that we work for and work with, that they do a great job at that. But yeah, there are things out there that are tools, and that's where a lot more of us need to be talking about that kind of stuff and talking about like let's sit down and have a conversation. And that's why I'm super focused on just talking about law enforcement leadership. And I'm very passionate about that. And that passion has led me to, I want to start up my own law enforcement leadership think tank, where it's just a group of people that are in law enforcement. I don't care if you're line level person, if you feel, let's be part of the think tank. Let's be there. Let's be there for one another. Let's have conversations. Let's be out there in the community. Let's do things that are gonna, because we do one of the hardest jobs, especially now. We gotta have a body-worn camera on at all times. So when we get in a critical incident, they're downloading all 10 hours of our body-worn camera.
Yep.
And that's all going as discovery in the court. So if you and I are standing out, because they can do record after the fact and everything, like they're going to dump it all.
The buffering is recorded.
So if we're sitting around talking about how bad our sergeant was or how bad this or that, there needs to be positive voices in law enforcement. And we can't, if we want to continue to be the place where it's like what you're describing of, we're going to nitpick everything that everybody does, and we're not going to have high trust environments. Like if we don't have a trust circle and a safety circle with doing what we're doing, how are we going to recruit people to do this job? And how are we going to retain people to do this job?
Yeah.
Because I can already see a distrust from people that have been on the job like I have for 13 years or longer. They're instantly going to think, well, that's weird. Somebody joined the whatever department because they saw what happened to George Floyd, and they want to be like, there's a lot of emotion wrapped up in that as us in law enforcement, because, we look at that and go, we would not have handled it that way.
Yeah. And this is an interesting, phenomena that's recently happened. I feel like that trust, the way the public views it is, if there's too much trust among officers, they're going to shield the bad ones.
Correct.
And I feel this is no hate on anybody that worked during the 80s or 90s, right? But generationally, where we're judged now is based on the past.
Mm-hmm.
And you can still address the individuals that need to be addressed while establishing that trust.
Yes.
I'm not going to shield you from missteps. It's like I told my current sergeant, I said, we're friends. We work together as deputies. And I'm like, we're friends. I would call him a friend. And I said, if I ever mess up and you don't hold me accountable, I'm going to judge your leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And his response is, if you thought I wouldn't hold you accountable, do you truly know me? And I was like, I'm just getting it out of the air right now, just mentioning it for both of us.
We don't talk about how to give and receive feedback.
Yeah.
I think there might be some agencies out there that are doing it great. I haven't heard of too many that are doing this.
It's very few.
Right.
So,
but sitting down because that's the, I have a great example of this that just happened last week. I had somebody come in, tenure their resignation, and they're moving to another state because they're about to have their first child and they need to be closer to family. Great. They were able to get a secure job that pays them more money. Awesome. Lower cost of living, all these things. But I wanted to find out, is it just law enforcement they're leaving? And they're like, no, it's just because of circumstance. But they're getting out of law enforcement. But I followed back up with, what can I do? Like, give me some feedback about my leadership.
yeah. How did I do
Right.
as an individual?
And he goes, I would just only tell you is I'd like to see you more when I'm doing my job. And my response to that is, I sort of took that in, but I'm like, well, some of your other teammates feel that to be a pressure environment, seeing the lieutenant a lot, that confuses them.
Yeah.
But I just took it as, this guy's giving me valuable stuff. And he's not saying, Matt, you're a horrible leader. He's just giving me a little bit of insight on how I can be a better leader. And I need to own up to that. And, that's where it comes. Because the thing is if my sergeants are not leading like I need them to lead, who is ultimately responsible for that? Me.
Right.
So I need to sit down. And I heard I have a friend that he's also very passionate about self-leadership, and I've sort of been helping him, mentor him through a hard time in his life. And he's been using some of these tools, and he's like, you have to tell people about these tools because it's changed his life. And he shared with me about TikTok or something that he saw, and he goes, this guy was saying about how he brings somebody in to write them up, and he writes himself up the first time. He says, I'm going to document this is failed leadership, but we need to do this differently next time. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Like I'm okay. Like I can get on board with that.
Yeah.
I can get on board with that because we want to talk about service.
Shielding.
Right.
It's I was always told in the military, the chevrons are, you're literally shielding the shit that falls down from above. Right. And I never wrote myself up, but it was always like a discussion of like, it was my fault. Like I didn't recognize this. Somebody from high up obviously recognized this. Right. That's my bad. But what are we going to do to move past this? And then it would turn into, do you want to go for a run? Or I can do like a quick little, like our letters of counsel were just so dismal. They literally went into a filing cabinet and never came out unless it became an issue. Right. And most of the time they're like, no, let's go for a run. And during that run, it was talking like, hey, how can we avoid this? How can we do better? How can I do better? How did I overlook this? And it was a lot of like, I wanted to know, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Right. I had no one. I took a class, like I went through it was like a month-long leadership course. They were really heavy on books, which is huge. But I didn't know what I was doing. There was no sergeant training. Well, this book or whatever book you read, I think a lot of times we put a book in front of somebody and say, you just read this book, you're going to be the leader that you want to be. That's when it like. It's not true.
It's not true.
It's setting yourself up for failure and disappointment. Right.
Well, and you're going to be like, I'm never going to be Simon Sinek. I'm never going to like, or you feel like I have to be like, you're uniquely yourself. Yeah. You're doing a good job leading yourself. That can translate out to other things, but where do you want, and being a leader in law enforcement is not for everybody. It's not for everybody. Being in law enforcement is not for everybody. You need to consider that at the very beginning when you're sitting in there and the amount of steps that you have to do and the amount of transparency you have to have, filling out a personal history statement, having people call, taking a psych test, taking all these things. And, those we make those barriers because we want to vet someone. But we can't really vet, like, there's no way to put them on a machine and say, hey, how are you talking to yourself?
Unless you're having those conversations.
Right.
There's no machine to do it.
Right.
That's why leadership, and I love that you said you're going to DU. I love that they have a leadership program because regardless of where you work, there's no machine that will do that right now.
Right. Maybe. And like you talking about AI is still like, LinkedIn's a prime example. If you pay for the premium, you get their AI tool.
Yeah. Where it rephrases.
Correct. And I'm sure you've used it too, where it's like, where you're like, hey, I'm going to plug it in. And this post I'm going to use, like I've written what I wanted to write and then see what the response is. Yeah. Cause I'm like, hey, if I use their AI, maybe the algorithm will be better and I'll get more views. But then I have to look and go, is that really the tone? Like, is
that true Matt?
Yeah. Is that true me?
Yeah.
So I find that the things I don't use, like I might use a little bit AI as thought starters.
Yeah.
But then when I get really started, I'm like, oh, this is truly Matt. And, I could be lengthy. I'm trying to be real brief because I have people say that was a great post, but it's way too long.
Right.
So I just want to do quick hitters, type of thing. But it also helps at work, right? Like there are many times where I want to send out an email where it's like, I'm just like, I'm furious about something.
Right. It acts as a filter.
Correct.
You type
put it
in
in-
what you're upset about.
Correct.
You say, can you make this a softer tone email?
Correct.
Press generate, and it generates the email, and you're like, yeah, that's exactly what I was looking
Correct.
for.
There's always the word collaboration.
Yeah.
That ChatGPT loves collaboration.
Yep.
But, you know, they're just thought starters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing, like with you doing this newly, there's a lot of things that AI gives us a lot of tools that we would have had to get our passions to a certain level where we could hire somebody to be able to get the input that we have or do many, many years of stuff.
Yeah, the statistics and data and everything.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's like I have a research person right there on staff, or I got a marketing person right there on staff where I can use that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that costs money to use the really good ones. Like if you're just,
Sure.
if
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
just using the
3.5 or what? Is it 3.0?
3.5,
3.5.
3.5 now.
Is the
4.0 is the pay for.
4.5 is coming out soon.
Yes.
Very excited.
But you can do all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And of course, there are going to be people that use that for no good.
Mm-hmm.
But you really just need to. It's thought starters. It's like, hey, again, just like when we go to therapy, when we put an idea in and we vet it and we ask the AI, is anyone else doing this or talking about this? They can sort of show you, well, they're talking a little bit about this, but they're not really talking about that.
Yep.
So it's really helps
Yeah.
for people like us that are entrepreneurs, because I would say that you're an entrepreneur doing this. You know,
Yeah.
you're
Fingers crossed one day.
correct. You'll get big enough where people will be advertising and stuff like that.
Right. But the main thing that I want to point out is it never gets rid of this personal interaction.
Right.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
So leadership, regardless, if there's any human interaction, leadership is going to be there.
Right.
Because you have to find out the why, what motivates people, what their desires are. And I think we were talking before this. I'm at this pinnacle point in my career where I've got to decide.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, my why is my family. So right now, I know it's not good for me to go into a supervisory position. I can still be a leader in the role that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I do a pretty good job of that. But the transition into supervision and that higher level of leadership is truly a sacrifice, in the sense of you are truly focusing on the people around you and building them up.
Right.
And, if I can't fully feel like I'm invested in that, and my mind's pulled other places, especially with a newborn on the way.
Right.
Like newborn children are.
Right. You don't want that.
Yeah. The people that I work with don't deserve that.
Right.
They don't deserve that Matt. They deserve the Matt that's fully
Right. Engaged. Ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
I think that's huge. That's great self-reflection.
Yeah.
And you can continue to work like every day you come down here and work on this on your days off, you're leading yourself.
Yeah.
You're leading yourself in whatever you want to do and go forward, and you're hearing great stories. Like I view you sort of as, like I view myself as, we're unique storytellers that are very unique, that want to get our message out. And for me, I just want to give it away. I want to give it away and encourage people, that just encourage them that there's something different.
Well, I will, and we'll wrap this up momentarily. I have two more things I want to talk
Go
about.
ahead.
One, your book club, but I do want to mention this because this was brought up to me by a friend of mine. And he said, the wise men that used to travel before the internet, before anything, would oftentimes gather around campfires and tell their stories.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they were so wise, is they sat down and had conversations. And he said, everyone says, oh, there's podcasts everywhere. And I'm like, that's great. It just means there's a bunch of people sitting down, having conversations. I'm not catching this table on fire because I like my house.
Yes, I get it.
But
we could be sitting outside around the fire pit
exactly
having the same conversation.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and it's a beautiful thing that I never made the correlation to. But when he made that correlation of like, this is intrinsically human. Yeah, there's you know, there's technology around us now that's able to record it and then broadcast it. But this has always been a human experience.
Right.
The podcasting thing has just come about because of the technology, the storytelling and sharing of information. It's always been here.
It's an empowering thing.
Yeah.
It's an empowering thing.
Absolutely.
And I can list, and I'm sure you can list off plenty of people that you watch on YouTube that are like, if you said, hey, I can't believe people watch this.
Yeah.
Or I can't believe that person, I'm so glad that that person is being able to make a living at doing that now.
Yeah.
And they have so many subscribers, and that's great. And, you know, they're going around the country and people are like, hey, you're visiting, let's have a meetup. Like that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like that's well more than FOMO and other things like that.
Mhm.
But I think it's great that we're able to sit down, tape this, and we can keep sharing it. Like it's not just, hey, I had this great talk. Like we were out at the lake, we're sitting around smoking cigars, and we had this talk over here. It's hard for me and you to capture the essence of what that was all about.
Yeah.
And that's what I like what you're doing is you seem to do that with all the guests that you have and be able to show them in a great, you know, just show them as authentic people.
Yeah. Yeah. Funniest comment I've gotten so far is when I do offer alcohol, is what did you put in the drink? It seems like they have a truth serum,
right?
You know, and I tell people, I'm like, people just want to tell the truth. They want to feel that there's a trust that they can be their authentic self. You know, unfortunately, too many people go around with barriers up.
Right.
And I think part of any leader, line level all the way up to the, you know, chief or sheriff, their goal is to make people feel like they are trusted and they can be their authentic self. I remember when I got hired onto this current agency, one of the interview questions was how long are you going to be here?
Oh, wow. That's a bold question.
Bold question. And I said, well, to be honest with you, I'll be here as long as I feel like I want to be here. That might be 6 months. It might be 20 years. I don't know. I said it really just depends on how I feel.
Right.
And I don't know if they really liked I ended up getting hired, so they didn't obviously mind the question, but it was a very bold question to ask and was very difficult for me to answer because younger Matt would have answered the way I would have thought they wanted to hear.
Yes. Authentic
Matt gave the authentic answer, and it was, I don't know.
Not sure.
Yeah.
Not sure.
Might quit tomorrow.
Right.
So
well, one bad day away, I guess.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
And then moving on to this book club, you kind of hinted at why you started it. Where's it going? Where do you see it going? Well, where can people reach out to you to get involved?
Well, right now we're getting ready. I don't know how far down, like when we're talking versus when the podcast is going to come out, but the beginning of April, we're going to be starting Ted Lasso Book Club.
Okay.
So it's going to be 8 weeks. It's probably going to be starting the second week of April.
Okay.
So we're going to be going over the first season of Ted Lasso. So we're going to be watching it as a leadership group and talking about it. Instead of doing a book, we're doing a little twist on the book club.
Yeah.
So we're doing that for our second quarter book. And that was one of my goals for this year is to set up a book club. And the first book club was over the first quarter, and it was 4 or 5 sessions every other week about Leaders Eat Last. I was able to meet 12 other people in that group, and that was really amazing. Didn't have all 12 at each meeting, but had 12 people engaged during that time.
And are you doing this online?
Doing it online.
Okay.
So Google Meets or Zoom.
Okay.
Still working out a time. So if they want to see that information, just go to you can reach me all the time at my LinkedIn.
Okay.
So if you're a LinkedIn member, you can just look me up on LinkedIn, Matt Davis. I think it's Matt/Davis/M11007.
If you send me your link, I'll add it.
Awesome. I'll add it on there.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be doing Ted Lasso. I actually wrote a paper on Ted Lasso leadership the first season for one of my classes a quarter or so ago. So I'm really excited about that. Right now, as of when we're taping right now, it looks like we have 10 people, and I think I've probably gotten some more people in the group maybe
Yeah.
today, but it's a wide mix of people, both in law enforcement and non-law enforcement. But there are a few chiefs of police that are going to be part of it, and some people that are different levels in police
Yeah.
departments, some people in the fire service as well, and some people that are just leadership outside of that. So I'm doing that. And then our third quarter, we're going to do Infinite Game by Simon Sinek.
Okay.
So
So going back to books.
going back to books.
Draw them in with the HBO special.
Well, you know what? I'm open. I'm open because I really am just looking for the law of attraction. I'm looking for people that have similar
Yeah.
views on leadership like I do.
Yep.
And I want to find those people so they can be part of the think tank. And the think tank should be, it's in its infancy stages right now. It's True Bold. So you can go to true-boldness.com.
Okay.
And just a little simple website there. I'm also on LinkedIn. Also, I'll give you all the links so you can put them down there. That's in the infancy stage. We'll see where that goes. Right now, I'm just trying to get out there. I've got it can be either 2-hour or 4-hour training for police departments or fire departments about leadership, or any organization that's looking for leadership. I need to have an entity where I could do that through. So that's where True Bold is. But the main purpose of True Bold is to unearth the true boldness within. And that's our tagline. And I hope to find some more people that want to be on that journey with me and help with that. So that's things that are happening right now, and I'm very excited about that. And going to be on some podcasts. I need to shout out some of the podcasts I'm going to be on
let's
here
hear
recently. So Deep Blue Project by Chris Workman is going to be one that I'm going to be on in the next couple of months. So be on the lookout for that.
Is this the first one?
This is my very first podcast. So
Woohoo!
very first one.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to be on the Leo First podcast with Michael Ladner.
Okay.
And he's written some books, and he's big into the leadership space of that. So I'm going to be doing that while I'm at the FBI LEDA conference.
Right on.
So if people are looking to try to meet with me one-on-one, I'll
Go
be
to
at the
LEDA.
FBI LEDA conference. It's in San Antonio. If you're a leader in law enforcement and you're looking for great law enforcement leadership training, they have an amazing group of
Do you have
people.
to have your trifecta
You do not.
to go to the conference?
You do not.
Okay.
You
Cool.
just have to be, you can choose to be a member of that. You have to take one of their classes to be a member, but you can go to their conference. The conference is going to be highlighted by Marcus Luttrell, is going to be the keynote speaker one of the days from Lone Survivor. So he's on my bucket list of people that I want people to meet. So that'll be really great, and that'll be a great time in San Antonio. And then
When is that?
that's coming up at that's April 28th through May the 3rd.
Okay.
In San Antonio. So you can go to LEDA.org and check that out for them at LEDA. They're a great organization, and they're great for law enforcement training. So, and then if you want to be part of my crew and following people that are following and want to see what I'm up to, LinkedIn. Please go to LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with people. If you message me, I'm glad to reach out and see if you're a training coordinator, if you're a chief of police, if any of this resonates with you, where you think your agency needs to learn how to find their why, start a control circle, and believe in something, have a belief structure. I'm your guy. Please call me. We'll set something up to be able to make that happen, and hopefully it's just the beginning of great things to go.
Well, based on this trifecta of approach, I think you're onto something. There's common threads in any leadership course that you go to, but when you pulled out that sheet, that is not a normal topic that is covered in leadership ever. They talk about people, they talk about production, they talk about how to focus on those. Mm-hmm. And very rarely is there a lot of introspective work.
That friend I told you about that I've been mentoring for the last year or so. I went to his house and we talked about control circles, and what he wanted to show me in his office. He is just as big as anything in this room. He's got his own printed control circle that he can see from his desk, and he personalized it for himself.
Right.
And powerful tool. I carry this around with me everywhere, and this is just, you can fill in the blanks. Like, Matt, you can do this yourself and have this set up for you. You could have this set up for your podcast. You could have this just for whatever, how you want to be a parent, whatever.
Yeah.
This is nothing more than a piece of paper or a circle, but the words that you fit in there and can be life changing.
Yeah.
And I've shared this in some of my chats in classes, and every time I get people that I'm in college classes with, where did you find that? That's amazing. That's unbelievable. So part of the thing I want to show people is you can create this. This is a living, breathing document for people. It can change over the years. It can do that. Same with your belief. You can do, like, as an agency, you can put up belief stuff. Like, I got inspired because, not just because of Ted Lasso, but we in law enforcement, we need to believe that we're in a trusting environment, and people got each other's backs. And I have believe up on my door at work. I have believe up on my wall in my office. You look at in my LinkedIn, I think most of all my pictures of things have believe in them. I'm glad that that's not trademarked. The word is not trademarked, or I'd have to be paying a bunch of money. So, believe is something that is a really paradigm shifter. And that's the other thing is, I always carry this around because this is what I came up with for Believe Supervisor 2024. And I don't, and if you go to my LinkedIn, you can see this because I did a whole 7-day thing, but this is what I shared with this is what the sergeants and I decided that we were going to lead with this year. And instead of having that first awkward meeting where you're like, hey, the LT and the sergeants are going to lay down the law for the year. You know what that is, right? I know
exactly what you're talking about.
We put this up on the board and handed this out, and we said, you can expect this from us. You can expect this from us.
That's a good way to break down the awkwardness of those meetings, because nothing sucks more than, one, you're changing your schedule most of the time, depending on where you are in the totem pole,
right,
as far as seniority. And then two, you're probably working with new people, which kind of sucks. And then three, you're like, I don't want to sit in this meeting and then hear the hammer drop.
Right.
As in like, do not do this, do not do that, do not do this, do not do that. And
correct.
You're just sitting there the whole time. You're like, I just want to go home.
Right.
Just let me leave.
It's uncomfortable, and you're sweating.
So this is what do they call these, haikus?
This is a acronym. We're using an acronym.
So the acronym Believe is on the left side. I've got to read this for the listeners, because a lot of people listen to this when they drive, is the feedback I got. So B is believe you are a leader, have confidence in yourself and your ability to lead. See your inner strength. E, empathy. Seek to understand diverse perspectives and experiences. Show compassion for others. And this is coming from you guys.
This is what our teammates can expect from us as leadership.
L, listening. Actively listen without judgment. Hear people's truth to build connection. I, invest in building trust. Take time to develop relationships and credibility. Earn trust through care. E, enthusiasm. Approach your role with passion, positivity, and energetic drive. V is vision. Have clarity of purpose and direction. Share an inspiring vision people can unite behind. E, excellence. Pursue mastery in yourself and your work. I love that you put yourself first. Commit to learning, growth, and quality.
Yeah. So that's what we gave out as supervisor. This is what we gave out to our team this year, saying this is how you can expect to be led.
And I just have to say it's beautiful that you met with your sergeants to come up with that and had that brainstorming meeting to where everybody has buy-in and everybody feels a mission.
Right.
Nothing sucks more than being in a place where you don't feel like there's a mission. And I think when you ask me why I I toyed with leaving law enforcement multiple times, mostly for financial prospects. Of you kind of get to a certain point, you kind of get capped out. Even if you promote, you're talking. And I know this is going to sound really entitled, but you're really only talking like $5,000 as a raise from one promotion to the next.
Yes.
And with drawbacks too, once you go salary to a lieutenant position,
No more overtime.
no more overtime.
Correct.
So you, in essence, you kind of take a pay cut depending on if you're working overtime. But to, to kind of facilitate that type of environment is good. So,
well, that's what I think. That's the future of law enforcement, and with wellness all being part of it, we need to be caring for the people that we lead. Because if we're not caring for them, we're going to turn around. There's going to be no one there.
yeah.
And that's something for community members to think about. Even the bad guys call law enforcement when they get in the real jam. And the firemen also call us when they get in the jam. And, I understand in my career that we very much see people on the very worst day of their life. We might have to do a death notification. We might have to arrest one of their family members. We might have to arrest them. We might have to give them a ticket that they can't pay for. We might have to tow their car because they don't have insurance. Just fill in the blanks. You're not seeing the red and blues on behind your car and excited about it. I know I'm not. If I get pulled over, I'm not excited about it. But we're there to try to adhere to what the community is looking for us to enforce and try to keep people safe. And we have not done a great job of creating trust with the people that we deal with. But that starts at home, and that starts with ourselves, and that starts at work, and that starts knowing what's in our control circle, what we can do, what our boundaries are, how we can have hard conversations and work with people and not make it about this emotion-filled thing. Like if I'm in my control circle and you start screaming at me about something I've done to you, I'm glad to have you emote for a few minutes, but I'm just going to look at you and go, Matt, are you done? Because this is about an issue. This is not about you. This is not
Right.
This is not about Matt. This is about, hey, there was something that was not done correctly. So let's just talk about it. And there needs to be no fear. If we have more trust in our environments, there's less fear. There's less fear. There's less cortisol. Like all this brain chemistry where people are going around and it's not a good situation.
Yeah, some of the funniest experiences I had is as a young sergeant getting really frustrated and looking at them and saying, like, looking at my, senior NCOs and like being in a situation where I'm like, I feel like yelling right now, so I'm going to walk away politely and I'm going to go yell at somebody or something. And I would like normally run outside and just like yell at a tree.
Right.
And I'd walk back in and I'm like, okay, I'm frustrated about this, this, and this. Getting that emote that really it's normal to be frustrated. Very normal to be frustrated. It's very normal to be sad. But to feel those emotions and then get to the root cause.
Right.
If
we're thinking of our organizations, whatever organization you're in, if you think of it more as a puzzle you're trying to put together, and understand that you might be really good at these three things. And I might be really good at the other three things. And if we're using appreciative inquiry instead of just standard problem solving where it's all bad, like let's just focus on the bad, but we talk about these three things, we can say, okay, hey, I've got Jim over here and he's really good at these three things that Matt is not good at. So we're going to partner them up and that's going to lock in the puzzle there. And then we're going to put some other people in there. Like, that's where we get amazing teams that are working, that the innovation is off the chart. The trust is off the chart, like all those things. But we don't, because we're a paramilitary organization, we don't think about those things.
Right.
Like slotting, it's all about seniority.
Yep.
Where if we had everybody take a personality test and, if you're a blue or yellow or green or whatever, you take it to DISC and we broke it down to, we're going to look at the supervisors on this team, and we're going to break them down on the disc and see where their strengths and their weaknesses are. And then we're going to look and say, okay, we're going to have 7 people under this person, and they need to fit into this. And we do it more that way.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be more beneficial. It might not. Might be a hot mess because cops all hate change.
Yeah, and try to stick an old salty cop on graves.
Correct.
Because we all know there's a certain personality that's on graveyards, and
Right.
there's a certain personality on days.
Right. One, these days, no one wants to work graveyards.
No. Well, there's still some young
People that do.
people that are like, I want to, I can't, well, if you chase vehicles and things like that, and you have more leniency, meaning like there's less traffic at night.
Right.
The young people that are willing to chase that.
Yes.
The rush or,
Mm-hmm. A lot more in progress calls you're going to get during that time.
So that's why I say there's a certain personality.
Correct.
So
right. And so we'll see when it changes. Like we could be having this conversation 3 years from now and there'll be a dramatic change in law enforcement because of legislation or something or brand new, another thought. Like we were talking about some of the progressive chiefs that are here in town that are trying to change the way their organizations work. Never know. Never know what might happen. So
I'll give him props. Chief Redfern of the Boulder Police Department.
Yes.
You are idolized by many
Right.
line level supervisors and command staff in the Denver metro area.
Yeah.
So
he's trying to be different.
yes.
And that's all we can do. Like setting that kind of thing and just going out there and, hey, if that doesn't go great or there are parts of that, like, let's pivot. We can pivot. We can do all these things. Like Simon Sinek was at the IECP conference in San Diego this year, and he spoke, and he had a breakout session after, and he was doing some, and he shared, he goes, I've already got people I've already heard in the elevator on the way over here or when walking from this room to the other room that people already invalidated what I shared with you because I'm just in business. I just, it's business type of thing.
Yeah.
And if you look at him, he consults with 4-star generals all the time and things like that. And the military are using things like this. Like there's some branches that are using this. There's some that are not. And what it comes down to is we can stay stuck in that, what policing was in when I started in 2011 and when I went to police academy in 2010 is not, we don't live in the same world. We don't do that. And we don't, in the facility that I work at right now, it was only a 30-year facility. It was built in 1986. Yes. So we're looking at that and we look at other facilities our size and we look and go, it's not apples to oranges in that situation, because if I went to toured a facility that was built in the last 5 years, it's much different. It can be handled by a lot fewer people because they're leveraging technology.
Mm-hmm. So it costs money up front, but in the long run, saves.
Right. Well, money for law enforcement has not been something that historically the places in Colorado, there are a handful of agencies, a handful of counties that do it the right way, but there are a lot of them that just kicked the can down the road. And now we're having to deal with, hey, are we ready to raise taxes and this kind of thing? And the bottom line is you're going to have facilities that are unsafe, that are, falling apart. And we could have, do you want justice reform? You want all this kind of thing? Like, let's put some money into having a place where we can have group therapy sessions in places that we can give them, have yoga if that's what you're going to, everybody wants to always say yoga is a bad thing.
Yoga is great.
And I love yoga, but
talk about being limber and relaxed.
Right. But having that in a detention setting.
Yeah. And the whole defund police movement, I think, again, the well-intended misinformed. Right. they want to reform justice. So it's, well, let's defund the police and fund these programs. But they don't realize that the way the budget is set up, a lot of times you need safe facilities for those other programs to go on.
Well, mental health is a prime example.
Yeah.
Of how law enforcement handles mental health in Colorado. We've got some great places. They've got co-responders and different things like that, clinicians with them. Great. But you look back 10 years ago, 12 years ago, that's when we could have got ahead of it, where we're like, hey, we need to have bridge some gaps here. And really, does a sworn person need to be responding to these type of calls for service?
That should have been a conversation had a long time ago.
Yes, right. And we're dealing with people in crisis, and now with the whole drones as first responders and things like that are going to be coming in the next few years. What does that all look like for law enforcement? And how does that? Because there's not more people flocking to law enforcement.
No,
we're losing more than we're gaining. And you could pour all the money that you need to pour into things, but there are not a lot of people that are going to sign up to, you're going to be videotaped 100% of your shift. If something happens, we're going to Monday morning quarterback it like nobody's business. You're going to have extra liability insurance. I mean, even doctors don't have the same, like we don't have surgeons that have body-worn cameras on all the time.
Right.
So, hey, you're going to be under constant surveillance. And there's some states like we have here that, hey, if the body-worn camera is not on or we can't hear what you're saying, we're going to assume the law enforcement officer is not telling the truth.
Yeah.
And, what are you to do there? And then you could do all great cop work. Even today, I got contacted by one of my old investigators that was on my team, and they did a great job on the case. And when they got a guilty plea, great, awesome. But the sentence that would have been given 5 years ago would be exponentially, like 10 times greater than what it was given this week. And many people will say, well, that was probably because of drug, this was probably a drug case, or no, this involved a firearm. People felt like they were going to die.
Right.
Like this is
it's not a property crime.
Right. It's not a property crime.
Right.
It's not something, but then we look and go, okay. And I don't know, hopefully this person has learned their lesson and will go on about their way. Great. But understanding that, and then having to sit across from somebody that their family member has been injured, and all they want is justice. It's going to be very hard, and that's what I think a lot of communities are struggling with. Like, there's not a lot of community engagement to get everybody on the same page, where we can all sit and have, like what you talked about, a little around the campfire talk about what the community really wants. We want to. I used this example the other day with someone. We were talking about, they were dealing with an issue at their workplace, and I go, it sounds like everybody wants to it's a boxing match where everybody wants to go to each one of their corners and then dare the other to come into their corner to have the fight. Like, if we were doing that, nobody would go see any UFC or anything like that.
They'd just walk around the cage.
And I feel like that's what the current political thing is. For you and I being independents, and we're independent in our thoughts, we want to find somebody that's collaborative and wants to have great things for great people. Like, our government should be working for us.
Yeah, we can get into the political talk about how the unfortunate reality is there's not ever going to be an independent that wins almost anywhere. The amount of money that you have to bring into a campaign is about $20,000 to $30,000 most of the time. You can finance that through like campaign funds and super PACs, if they are independent super PACs. But most of the time, people are going to see the R, the D, and they're going to vote,
Right.
which one they align more with.
Right.
Unfortunately,
Well.
you could be a stellar independent. You could have all the same ideals, but they're going to say, I'm more right-leaning than this,
Right.
or I'm more democratic than this. And
My qualifying question to talk to anyone about politics is, I just have one question to ask, and it's, how many branches of government do we have?
3, technically.
Thank you. Yes, we sure do. But you won't believe how many times I've asked that question and I get 7.
Oh, no.
I get 7. I get 5. I got 9 one time.
Yeah.
All people with higher degrees than myself
Right.
it said 5 or 7.
Yeah.
So, that's the other thing is there are a lot of people that have learned their civics and their politics by 180 characters
Yeah.
or clickbait or whatever. And I won't blame the journalist. I blame the person. They're not doing their full research.
Yep.
If they want to, just like we talk about this book is not going to tell you how to lead.
Yeah.
It's not the turnkey. It's not the microwave. And neither should we be thinking about that about our politics or where our money is going to or any of these things. And deeper discussion.
Yeah.
But
well, right on, Matt. It's been such a pleasure.
yeah, thanks for having me.
It's late. Thanks for staying so late.
No problem.
I'm gonna try to get this out soon,
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate it.
or at minimum make little shorts of that important, pertinent details that are coming up soon. So
That'd be great. I really appreciate it, and I
Yeah.
hope that we can get together again and talk and
Yeah.
and maybe have some other topics to talk about.
Love it.
All right, well, great. Thanks for
Awesome.
having me.
Bye, guys.